Is the Finance Committee minutes of the 2nd of October 2014. Would someone who was present at that meeting please move those minutes as a true and correct record? Deputy Mayor Chesterman, seconder, Councillor Mallett. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, Finance Committee action list, which is on page 20. Item number 8 on page 23, we'll be seeing in the finance report, which is presented next, some of the changes in the reporting, which has been signalled by the chair and deputy chair, and which is coming through as a result of the new computer general ledger computer system. The item number 15, the reserve land purchase, you'll recall that there's some work being done to update council records on this, and it was expected that there would be a report back in September. That's still progressing, with a report being expected on the 4th of December. Item number 10, I just had a query on this one. Do we have a date for this, given that the S&P committee is only six days away? This is on the Hamilton Ring Road.
Mr. Chair, I could raise it when we do the normal reporting, but I've asked for the paper to be removed from the 19th of November strategy policy, and it'll come back in February. So in the meantime, we've got the display set up next door for councillors to come through and have a look at some of the proposals. I just felt it was more prudent at the point we're at to get the input from councillors and to take that input before we came back to councillors rather than rush it up on the 19th.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher. You have a question?
Yes, sorry, I was out of the room for 15. Is there any there's no update, I take it, in terms of what's in front of me, what sits in front of me in terms of this action list?
Only the items which I have discussed. Did you come in during this discussion?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't, but I'm just saying, in terms of item 15, I apologise I was out of the room. There's nothing further than what's on front here, in front of me.
Item 15. That's still progressing, yeah.
He's on a previous item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Item 15?
And item 15 in that action list of the item 7.
Thank you for your patience.
Your Worship.
Just raising a query on item 11, which is on page 23, about the Caro Street matter, and I did raise with you, Chair, whether we should continue to allow the resolution to stand, given that it hasn't been actioned. So I just wanted to hear from the General Manager in respect of, where this really is at, and what's the time frame looking like for that? Because it's very vague.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's got my name on there because it involves the road. I'd have to go and just engage with Ken Cunningham just up to date, but my understanding it's just still in abeyance and sitting there, and they haven't moved to give effect to that resolution.
Okay, so could I ask, Chair, that perhaps that information be obtained, just so that I can get a little bit more clarity around what's happening there, because we've had a council resolution in relation to that since February.
No, I think that item is the well.
Oh,
which
the well
is public
one, sorry.
excluded, yeah.
Oh, right. No.
Across the road, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I've been given the wrong information then.
Okay,
I've been given the wrong information.
okay, so we'll,
So can someone get me the correct information?
about the telecom or the well network?
The well.
That's in the
Someone
public
get me-
excluded on the
Can
action
someone
list?
get me the correct information? I was asked for the information on that item and I was given this. And so I've been given the wrong information. So if I could be given that, and I'll raise it in public excluded.
Okay,
Thank
thank
very
you.
much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and item 19, perhaps some assurance some assurance to members of the committee. Perhaps if I just verbally report to that care is being taken involving both the chair and deputy chair in ensuring that what is public excluded and what isn't is being done in some detail at the agenda setting meetings. But happy for that to be a continuing item if it is still of concern to members of the committee.
Excuse me, Rob, can I just ask, is that resolution pertain particularly to this committee or to all council activity? I think
It was all.
Pardon?
It was all.
Yeah. So it's
Could I
probably
suggest,
needs to be
Chair,
on everyone's.
shouldn't actually be on the action list. It's a procedural matter that should be referred to the democracy manager
Okay.
to raise at every agenda setting.
All right, so let's remove it from Chris.
Sorry, Mr Chairman, sorry to jump in again, but I think we've got two issues here. I think there's a Caro Street issue in the public excluded, and then there's this Caro Street issue. So this issue relates to a building across the road on the other side from council.
Yeah, we have
that's
resolved that, Chris. Yeah, sorry, we have resolved that.
Oh, sorry, I'm
Yep,
just talking.
okay. You were busy collecting the information. I
That's all right, and I understand
You're a
that.
champion, Chris.
Now, I know what this one's about. I'd raised an issue about the other one, but I've been given the wrong information. So I've now been given the right information and we'll raise it in public exclusion. Thank you.
This is Coro Street, is it?
All right, so having discussed, are there any other items for discussion on the action list? Open. All right, well, also move, have a seconder, please. Councillor Mallett. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item number 8, which is a report back from the Council Control Organisation, CCO Subcommittee. I ask Councillor Mallett if he could report back on the recommendations.
And I'll quickly throw the ball to Richard.
Okay, through you, Mr Chair. Thank you, Councillor Mallett, for giving me the opportunity to talk to this point. We're in a position whereby there is a deed in place between the airport and the shareholding councils. The deed related to the development that was undertaken to extend the terminal and the runway back in 2005 and 2006. The deed was put in place to protect council in respect of some uncalled capital that was issued as security in relation to a debt that the airport entered into. Effectively, the uncalled capital was security. We are just an attempt to try and tidy up this arrangement. The requirement for the has been completed. What is outstanding is the uncalled capital. I'm working with the airport to have the uncalled capital cancelled or repurchased by the airport, and if that is done, there's no need for the deed. So what this recommendation effectively is doing is, subject to the agreement of all the shareholders and the purchase back of that uncalled capital, because that's our exposure, our potential risk, that deed is revoked as more of an administration tidy up recommendation in respect to the deed. But the substantive matter is the uncalled capital, and so we won't do anything until the uncalled capital has been purchased back.
Just a question, if I may.
Councillor Wilson.
Why would we want to action this prior to having the matter resolved? What's the urgency? Shouldn't it be let you complete whatever negotiations you need to do, and once that's resolved, come to us? Why would we be doing this in advance? What's the...
Well, there's actually no rush, Councillor Wilson. Effectively, this recommendation is a subject to recommendation. So, subject to this report being adopted, I will continue. We are working now to work with the airport to have that uncalled capital repurchased. It's just a case of getting the recommendation on file so I can proceed. Once it happens, I don't have to come back to council and seek approval for it.
Councillor Gallagher.
Just point of process, and forgive me, I don't initially have the brilliance of some people around this table, but I'm trying to absorb this information, and I have to say I don't find it satisfactory that there's not some at least one-page bullet point that explains the issues, and I'm trying to interpret, what you are saying. But in terms of a pre-read, etc., unless I've got this wrong, I've gone from item 8 to item 9. It's one page. So I just seem to think it's a matter of procedure, and the decision is here for this bit, all right? Then it obviously goes to we send it to wherever. So could I just ask in future that there is at least an explanatory, even if it's just recirculating a report that may have been attaching the CCO committee for future reference?
Mr Chair, I just have a follow-on question from that, and I concur with Councillor Gallagher about that. I have found the report, but the report on this item is public excluded. So I need some guidance on how I can ask the questions to make sure I understand this piece of paper.
Okay, so I'll make it clear at this point it's no longer required to be publicly excluded. The reason it was publicly excluded at that stage was the other local authorities involved hadn't actually had the discussions with their councils, and we didn't want to put this forward until such time as they had done that. They have all had at least preliminary conversations, and in some cases actually moved this as recommendations, subject to agreement from all other local authorities as well. So I am comfortable to take any questions in open forum on this matter.
Well,
Could I suggest, Richard, that perhaps you briefly explain what the benefits are to the council of having the airport agree to the removal of the unpaid shares, or the repurchase, or however they're going to actually deal with that in their financial accounts?
Yeah, so at present there is about $9.4 million worth of uncalled capital distributed amongst the shareholding councils. That uncalled capital was put in place back in 2005 to effectively provide security for a debt that the airport entered into. So we effectively have provided security against that through the uncalled capital.
Rob, Richard, I don't know, members, you know what uncalled capital is? Uncalled capital,
Sorry.
Yeah.
just the term might be confusing people. Do you understand what it is? If you know what it is, that's
I mean,
fine.
in the end,
I can
what I
ask,
want,
I don't know.
if I can say, as a member of this governance team, because I'm here to be accountable, because now this is no longer, and there's things that I don't agree with the delegation, and that's history. That's as it is. I lost that argument, but suddenly this is in front of me, and I am an average person who wants to exercise proper governance, and I'm not going to pursue this, and I'll be wanting just to receive the report, do nothing until I actually do have all of the background material that then I can bring to bear to make a considered decision. I'm not wanting to frustrate this at all, but this for me is personally not adequate, and I do appreciate Councillor Mallett's asking the CEO to do some explanatory, but I think a written report would have helped this process. And it's not an issue that's open. I'm happy even if it's had to be in confidential. I respect.
Can I
that
define
process.
uncalled capital so the members understand what that means?
I think that's what...
Oh, we're going to do that?
Yeah, I
Sorry.
think that's...
Yeah, I'm just trying to, at the will of the committee, I'll continue if that's what is required. So effectively, uncalled capital is capital that has been issued, so shares that have been issued by which we haven't paid for them. So it's there was $9.4 million worth of shares that effectively at any point in time the airport could have called up and said, please pay for these shares. So it was recorded in our financial statements as effectively a purchase or a commitment, so that at some stage in the future we would have to buy those shares, and that would require us to effectively borrow to buy those shares. The airport has negotiated, or is in the process of negotiating a different security arrangement with their bank, and which means that they will no longer be using those shares as security. They're no longer using those shares as security. There's no reason for us to actually have those shares issued, and if they purchase back those shares, our obligation to buy those shares is removed, and therefore the contingent or the commitment that exists is removed as well. So it de-risks council's position.
A question from Councillor, from Deputy Mayor Chesterman, then Councillor Wilson.
Is it not simply a removal of a risk to council, in the sense that those older councillors will remember several years back when the first tranche of those shares was called up, and we had to find, I think, 6 or 6.5 million that was not in the plan because the shares were called up to reduce the debt. So this is really a technical way to ensure that we have no ongoing risk and no surprises.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I just want a point of clarification. I fully understand the process. I just want a clarification. The debt would transfer from us to the airport company because, in theory, if the airport is then buying the shares and the New Companies Act enables that, then they'll have to either borrow or have the cash to pay for them, as distinct from reducing the shareholding to negate the issuance of the shares.
Yep, so they'll be paying for the shares at consideration paid, which was nothing. So it's a paper transaction. There'll be no physical cash exchanging hands. So we have, effectively at the moment, they could ring us up and say we wish to call up that capital. At that stage, we'd have to pay for those shares. What's outstanding, that's never happened for. So if we were to undertake this transaction, no cash exchanges hands. They effectively pay the consideration we paid initially for those shares, which was, might well have been $100. They effectively settle it at $100. I can confirm that amount. And that's the transaction that happens. They will then either determine to cancel those shares or whatever they choose to do. And at that stage, we have no longer any risk of those shares being called up, having to pay for them. So it's, just to make it very clear, this is, like the Deputy Mayor mentioned, is an attempt to de-risk. This is something that was raised by the CCO subcommittee, and it has been raised by numerous councillors in the time I've been here that did present a risk. And whenever the chair and the management of the airport presented to a committee or a subcommittee, the question was asked: is there any intention to call up that capital? It does remove that risk, and it is purely a what we're recommending in the report. And to be fair, I'll circulate a copy of that report to the members of the council. It does effectively represent an administration function, which ultimately means that we can tidy up a few housekeeping issues and at the same time significantly reduce our exposure.
Thank you. So on the basis, Councillor O'Leary, you had another question?
So just clarify, I'm whizzing through the report. I mean, I have pre-read it, but on 15.2, the deletion of that director's clause in the Constitution.
Yes.
That's just over time.
So there's a deletion clause.
What that is?
Part of what I've done within the report as well is I've ensured that we maintain a degree of control and influence. So whilst they will not be in a position to call up any uncalled capital, I've recommended 2 changes to the Constitution. One is to strengthen the definition of a major transaction within the Constitution, and that will mean that a major transaction is calculated as a percentage of assets. I'll reduce that percentage. So if there is a transaction of a certain value, the value it's got to hit before they have to go to a special consultation process is less now, so that gives us added level of protection over the airport, over and above what's required by the Companies Act. And that's for no other reason apart from the fact it just provides that greater influence. And the other one is there is an incorrect clause currently within the Constitution which lists the initial founding directors, I understand, and it was never completed, and so it's just a sentence that goes nowhere. So that recommendation is to remove that sentence that goes nowhere while we're in the process of amending the Constitution. I just wanted a little bit of housekeeping and tidy it up at the same time.
Yep. Good.
So on the basis that perhaps in future there be some written attachments to this report, are you happy, Councillor Gallagher, with the explanation?
I'll just be voting against that, and I'll explain governance as I see it as a directorate. I'm not going to deep dive into a subcommittee work. If there's a report which I'm required to make a decision, attached to this report is the staff report. I can then reflect on it, and I don't think I should have even had to alert anyone. And so to me, I'll be just voting against this, and I'm sure once I do see the attached report, which you'll circulate, I'll be relaxed. But if I'm not relaxed, I'm now covered. And I have to say, this organisation has some very recent history in terms of sort of process. I'm not criticising the CCO committee at all. I'm not criticising your work. I'm just saying in future, if you want us to make a decision on something, then you need to either recirculate the original report or give us, or attach an update.
Comments are noted. Right, any further discussion on this report? Otherwise, I will recommend, Councillor Mallett will
Yeah,
recommend.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Those in favour, please say aye.
And I request that vote recorded and reason, please.
Thank you.
And so,
Sorry, you said those in favour
Those
say
in
aye?
favour, yeah.
aye.
Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those
Aye.
against?
No?
No.
Right, 2.
And Chair, can I just in terms of picking up on the comment, I think when there are some of these sort of recommendations from committees or subcommittees that need a bit more explanation, yes, there does need to be a one-pager attached. But I'd also like to point out that councillors have access to all of the information, and while I accept absolutely, there's no obligation to read the ones that aren't in your subcommittee, it might be useful to have included the link in the report, and then you could have just flicked over to it. Yeah, okay, thanks.
All right, move on now to item 9, which is the recommended dates for reports to be presented to the Finance Committee. And the recommendation here is that the report be received, which I will move. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mallett. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item number 10, which is the 10-year monitoring report. I'll ask CFO Paul Condor to present that. Just as a prelim into that, this is the first quarter of reporting under the new General Ledger accounting system. Deputy Chair Councillor Mallett and myself have been working with the finance team in looking at reporting changes to the ones that were previously generated from the earlier system used. So we would be appreciative of some feedback after the reports have been presented in terms of how useful you find some of the changes that have been made in the reporting.
And so, Chair, we would feed those back to you by email or something
That
to
would
you?
be, yeah, that would be
okay,
great
thank
if
you.
you could do that. Thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I again just would like to reiterate what the Chair has said around the report format. This is starting to utilise the reporting tools that are within the AX Dynamics system and are identified as part of the key benefits for that project. The aim of the changes is to endeavour that we endeavouring that we provide quality information for Council and the Committee at the right level, that is presented consistently. For example, we have actually changed the treatment or the way we treat brackets so that that is more consistent. And I'll just take a moment to talk through the basic principle behind that so people can understand that. It's called maths, isn't it? It is, yes, it is basic maths. The principle that we have behind that as guidance to the finance team and to the rest of the organisation is that where there is a benefit to council or effectively revenue coming into council or a reduction in expenditure, then those things would be treated as positive and therefore have no brackets. And where there is a disbenefit or a negative variance, those things would be clearly shown with brackets around them. So those would be a decrease in revenue, an increase in expenditure, or an increase in the capital expenditure program. By having that very clearly stated and being built into the way we're designing these reports, we hope that that will make it more consistent right the way through the organisation and also make it easier for you in following the reports as well. The other thing that we are trying to do is to ensure that all the reports are easily understood. And so you'll see in the activity summaries that there is what's termed the waterfall graphs. And those are trying to show where the variances are and the relative scale of those variances to the overall cost of the organisation in those activities. As the Chair has said, we are looking to do some improvements over time. Two of the planned improvements that we have to include the development contribution commentary that is in a separate report this time into the regular quarterly reporting, and also to improve the separation between what is considered direct expenditure and indirect expenditure. At the moment, one of the things that has occurred is that we have support activities that actually sit within the activities themselves, sitting in some cases within the indirect lines, and actually inflating the indirect expenditure lines, making it look like they have been allocated more overheads, and at the same time budget against some of those activities is sitting within the direct expenditure. So we're trying to match those so that they are consistent and don't cause any confusion going forward. As the Chair said, we would welcome feedback from you on these changes, and either to myself or the Chair directly. I would like to highlight a few matters from the report itself before we take it as read. First is that it has been a positive 3 months for Council as an opening 3 months of the financial year. Revenue is up. The development contributions, invested assets, positive revenue though, has an element that is likely to be timing differences. There is uncertainty as to when those are likely to fall in the year, and so some of that difference that occurs at the moment, a positive variance, may reverse over time. Overall, revenue makes up the most significant part of the positive result to date. Expenditure is close to budget, but there is a need to continue to monitor, particularly wages, which have shown a little bit of variation across the organisation. Overall debt level is improving, though 3.4% of that can actually be, $3.4 million of that can actually be related back to the capital expenditure, which was running behind. And again, as that catches up, we would expect that to reverse. So other than that, I'll ask you to take the report as read, and then I'll take questions.
Councillor Mallett.
Paul, just the discussion we had previously, so it'd be worthwhile talking about it here. You talked about the 3.4% behind on our CapEx. That's at the end of the first quarter. So at the end of our first quarter, we only completed 13% of our total program. So I've expressed concerns you just minutes ago about, are we again having a carryover type scenario arising, or deferred capital as it's now called? And, well, is that what your perception is? And that will be the gentleman down there need to speak, I guess, to that.
Yes, each of the managers would be able to speak to their own capital expenditure program. There is a risk that there will be some carryover from my assessment of it, but at the same time there is active measures being taken by managers to ensure the capital program is actually delivered. Okay. But there is a risk there, yes.
Okay. So just to put it in context, I guess, we've got an $81 million CapEx program. We're a quarter of the way through the year. So if it was even, I'm not saying it is even, you'd expect us to have done 20 million. We've done 13 million. Sorry, beg your pardon, we've done 10 million. So we're quite a bit behind. If the CapEx program is linear or evenly spread, it would suggest we are way behind, and it's just difficult for me to comprehend how we're going to catch that up. And I know you're not the guy who knows the answer.
Yeah. The capital program is not linear. It is.
I appreciate that, but that's still a significant. We're behind the 8 ball way early, I guess. Yeah.
Well, perhaps the response to that, Councillor Mallett, might be to ask the managers as to whether or not they are seeing, now that we're another almost 2 months beyond that first quarter, whether there are any significant capital projects which are not likely to be delivered in terms of the annual plan program for this year. Or perhaps one first who might have a number that may not be delivered.
I think in my area we'll achieve more, so I'm quite confident. We've got a few issues around timing, but I'm confident that we'll figure it out.
This is being recorded, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Lance. Chris?
I have a mixture, mostly on track. I do have an emerging issue with the Rotatuna Reservoir, looking to come to finance and monitoring on that one next in early December. But that would be quite a substantial one, and the issues are just getting the technical scope right and tying into our water master plan. So it's just getting the scope of the project right. But that would probably be the one that springs to mind the most.
Thank you. Blair?
Yeah, look, mine is in the property area. It's a renewals program. It's on track. I guess the one that is currently shown as underspent is in the pension housing renewals, and part of that is to do with phasing. Part of that is also to do with the decision that council obviously consider at the end of this month. But we are in that particular program undertaking essential renewals, and obviously on the decision it may then influence the level of renewals for the remainder of the year.
Sorry, Blair, so in terms of phasing, your phasing's going, so you wouldn't expect to have spent a lot of yours early, is that right?
Certainly in the pension housing, not necessarily. No, it's not the right construction period for it.
Okay. So it's not like stuff that you thought would have been done in the first quarter hasn't been done. It's you're back end loaded, so to speak.
Back end loaded, but I think there's also an element of just being conscious that we're in the middle of a review process. So we'll just see how that decision plays at the end of this month, and then we'll assess the program from there.
Thank you. Brian? Sorry.
It's my comment. I have no expectation of any carryover on capital works out of this year's budget. I have one project at the moment, a exhibit, Thymang exhibit at Hamilton Zoo, that is tracking probably 2, maybe 3 months behind schedule, but it will be completed well ahead of the end of the year.
For you, Mr Chair, the ICE program work is tracking on track with the exception of the currency program, which has been scheduled out for the remaining years of this 10-year plan. That was due to being front-loaded at the beginning of the last 10-year plan.
So is that a significant amount of expenditure just in that particular
I'll
program?
have to get back to you with the specific quantum funds.
Okay.
I'll just add that the IS program of work was effectively put into the 10-year plan as a lump, and you'll notice that at the end of each financial year there is a portion of deferred capital expenditure in relation to that, because we effectively undertake it over a 10-year program, but it was funded all up front, so it is split. So we expected to see that the plan is going to time and program. It's just the funding wasn't lined up with that program.
Okay, thank you. Right.
Mr Chair, can I suggest, because we don't run a smoothed capital expenditure budget, because a lot of the work that the council does is, seasonal, I guess, weather dependent. So could I suggest, because we do have a full capital expenditure budget here on 43, 44, can I suggest that we perhaps accompany that with a graph that shows the bumps, so that, to aid councillors, they'll know that, particular months are particularly fruitful for capital expenditure items and others are not. Because it's, 3 months is sort of so early into the piece, but I am pleased to see that we are finally receiving the capital expenditure budget, because it is a very important aspect of the work that we do. So thank you very much for including that, because I think that's a vital piece of information.
Great. Any further questions?
Just a couple of ones for matters of clarification. On page 37, activity statement, we talk about water by metre rates, right at the bottom there. Then we talk about targeted water for supply, and we spoke about this earlier. Is there someone, because Paul wasn't quite sure what the difference between the two was. What is the difference, Ian?
Please, through the chair, Councillor Mount, there is no difference. It's exactly the same.
They're the same thing.
They're exactly the same. Well, it's a bit of history in the statement of comprehensive income. We use that wording because that's the wording prescribed through the New Zealand Institute of the Accounting Standards. That's why we use it there. And we've just historically referred to as water by metre as water by metre. So,
Can they be the same thing from now on?
well, we can change the wording to make.
Because they are the same thing. Is that what you're saying to me?
They are exactly.
Thank you. Now, page 38, one of our explanations, and this is something we've discussed previously, but I think council should be aware of it. One of the notes Note 2 at the bottom of page 38. Council is expected to undertake asset revaluations of the past 2 years, which would have seen asset values increase. These were not required. The annual budget has not been restated to reflect this. So do you want to just explain to councillors the impact of that situation? Is that we have our budgeted depreciation, my understanding, is greater than our actual depreciation. Is that correct?
It is. Good afternoon, councillors. So in this instance, what we're dealing with, the issue is that on the balance sheet, on the statement of financial position, the value that we show our fixed assets at is higher than they actually are at. Now, that's a historic issue we have that dates back to the LTP we did 3 years ago, where we had assumed that revaluations would take place. Those revaluations did not take place.
So, sorry, can I stop you there, Ian?
What the effect of, sorry?
Yeah, so that meant that when we did this long-term annual plan 4 years ago, when you first did it,
Yes.
you expected, and I think it was last year, 2013, you expected valuation to be done,
Yes.
and you expected that to increase our assets. So you factored that into the 10-year plan, and that's what's in one of these columns.
That is correct. So those asset values were driving, obviously were driving the budget we put in for depreciation. Yeah. And if council will remember, when we presented the current annual plan for the 14-15 year, towards the end of that process, we identified that the asset value was not as high as it was, and depreciation was tracking down, and we reported that last year through our monitoring reporting. And as a result, through this annual plan, we reduced our depreciation budget and allowance by 3.3 million to reflect that value. So that's now feeding through into the information you've seen today. We still have the problem, though, that on the balance sheet, the asset values are still showing higher than they actually are. But we have most certainly taken care of the depreciation impact of that.
So that means the depreciation in our income statement, the budget depreciation in our income statement, doesn't really relate to the asset valuations in our balance sheet.
That is correct,
Okay.
yes.
Are we talking about actual figures or the budgeted figures in the balance sheet?
Okay, so let's separate two. So we've got depreciation, which appears on the statement of comprehensive income, the P&L. Both the actual and the budget there reflects the actual value of the assets as they stand today.
The actual depreciation on the actual values.
Yeah, actual values. On the balance sheet, on the statement of financial position, when you look at the budget, you'll see a value for the total value of the council's fixed assets. That number is higher than it should be because it had anticipated the revaluation that did not take place, and that number should be a little bit lower than that. But we did not restate that number when we presented the balance sheet for this current annual plan.
Thank you.
Your Worship, a question?
Yes, are we looking at risks and opportunities?
Um,
Are we dealing with that one as well?
Well, let's do that.
Okay,
yeah.
so page 40 and 41. I just have some questions on that. The legal costs associated with the Waikato Show Trust arbitration. Can I just have some explanation on that? Well, that's been an outstanding matter for some time, and we have a budget for legal costs, so
Yes, Your Worship.
explain why.
Through the Chair, the $100,000 that's been estimated for those costs is a quotation or an estimate that we've received from our legal advisors. We had not factored that into our budgets at all at the last LTP or the previous annual plan because the costs at that stage weren't envisaged because the arbitration process hadn't commenced at all.
Okay, so I'm raising with the CFO an issue in relation to this because this has been an ongoing matter and we've certainly been cognisant of an arbitration for some time. So what I'm hearing is this is an anticipated legal cost to carry out an arbitration process.
That's correct.
Yep.
Look, that is correct, Your Worship, through the Chair. It should be noted that we did not initiate the arbitration. The arbitration's been initiated by another party, so and we weren't anticipating that at all until it was received.
Yes, okay, so I'm raising now with the Chair that I have an issue about that being included, and I think that that cost should be absorbed in existing budgets because I believe that that was a known matter. The other matter I want to raise is the land purchase for this, no, not that one, sorry. The property purchases on page 41. So these two items are the items relating to purchases. Just remind me, I thought we had a budget for purchases of land. I know we have one for reserves, wasn't it? It's in Lance's area. I'm just trying to get a fix on this.
Yes,
Do we have a budget for
We
land
have
purchases?
a budget for purchase of land.
Mhm.
These ones are outside of the scope of that budget.
Yeah.
But again, like all of the risks and opportunities that are here, the aim is to actually reach the point where these have been absorbed again back in through other changes that are made.
Yes, no, I understand that. What and I've already signalled at the last finance meeting that I am interested in looking very carefully at each one of these that gets on the list, because yes, the swings and roundabouts at the end of the year, but I'm looking for more of an upside at the end of the year than a downside. So my recollection was that the budget held for purchase of land as it crops up has been underspent for the last couple of years. Lance? You've got a budget, haven't you, for purchase of land reserves, or, yep, and it's been underspent for a couple of years, because I've queried it in every budget round.
Yes, and some of that's commitments through resource consents, and
Right.
sometimes the timing of those actually being activated is beyond our control until the person developing the land or subdividing the land actually goes ahead with that resource consent. So we have commitments, but sometimes we're not sure when those commitments are actually going to come to fruition.
Right.
So
And does-
you're correct,
Yes.
Your Worship, and I think we've given advice that it's been prudent that sometimes we carry that money forward because we've got those outstanding liabilities.
That's right, we know they're coming, but it's just the timing. So just clarify for me, land purchases for roading, does that come out of that budget then, Lance?
No.
The land purchases for roading comes out of Chris's budget?
For the Southern Links project, Your Worship, we've been signalling through the reporting that there is no budget, that it was a risk that people would come forward for property acquisition,
Yeah.
and that we'll deal with it through the risk and opportunities.
Yeah.
We are built into our draft 10-year plan that we report to council provision over the next 10 years. So,
But do you have a budget for land purchases in relation to roading generally?
we used to have a small budget around $20,000
Okay.
or something for very miscellaneous things that
Yeah.
happen on the network, but I'm not sure whether that's in this year, but
And
it's
that's,
a very small,
yeah,
low-level budget.
okay, no,
for
that's
this.
fine, thank you. Sorry, I have another one. I'm interested on page 40 at the Rotorua Town Centre, additional funding for the development plan. So can I just have some more explanation on that and why that's an additional bit more detail?
So we had budget in 13-14 budget for that.
Yeah.
We were expecting that to be completed by July. The CDP processes ended up being more complex than what we expected, working with the developer and obviously with Brian's team as well. And it's quite complex planning matters. So last year it was in Sally Sheedy's Parks and Open Spaces budget, there was a favourable variance at the end of the year in that budget. This year, that sum of money is not there, so we're going to have to wear that out of our current operating budget in Sally's area, because it wasn't it wasn't actually allowed for, and we haven't carried it forward.
Right, okay. So had it been finished last year, it would have probably been picked up within that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks very much.
Councillor Forsyth. Doesn't matter. All right, Councillor Mallett, one more question.
Yeah, just the reports have, on pages 45 through 57, which are kind of mini activity reports for each of the departments, I don't know if we call them. I raised the issue that the overheads in these departments all seem to be way askew, and it appears that the reports are reporting incorrectly. Is that right, Ian or Paul? So members should be aware that these are not accurate.
That's correct. There is a line that includes the support services within the indirect costs, whereas the budget is actually sitting up in the expenditure line. So there is a mismatch between where the variance is showing, there is a variance showing, and probably the best one that demonstrates this is actually in page 57, where there is a cost allocation there under corporate overheads in the actual column of $133,000. That should in fact be sitting up in the expenditure row if it was to match the budget that is there for that, and therefore it shows as a variance of 133. This is related to the definition of direct and indirect expenses and support services. Unfortunately, in the reporting, were put down into that indirect area when they should have been in the direct expenditure.
So the net result is that for all of those activities, pages 45 through 57, the line that says corporate overheads, which is halfway down the little grid for each of them, is overstated, and the line that says expenditure above is understated a little bit, to some extent in each of them.
Yes, that's
And
correct.
and sorry, not to, just to paraphrase what you're saying, that's because the report picked up, what do you call it? You call corporate overheads, which is Richard, which is a certain level, and then there's what was the other group name you had?
There are support services within each of the activity groups.
So if maybe you give some of the examples.
So as an example, within the events and economic development area, there are certain cost centres that include the group manager and that level, and some of the activity that's done centrally within that activity group. Those are then allocated out within that group. What has occurred in this case is those allocations have actually ended up dropping into the indirect when they should still be within the direct.
So what's happened is some direct costs, instead of being charged against the activity through the expenditure tag, have been charged as an overhead when they are actually a direct cost.
That's correct. The overall position for each of those groups
Doesn't change.
Has not changed.
So obviously there's a bit of tweaking required within those accounts to actually show them in the right spaces going forward.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Further questions or discussion? If there is none, I shall move. Coming back to item 15, that the report be received and the risk and opportunity schedule be received. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Mallett.
So, sorry, Chair, I'm not comfortable with the 150 being on the risks and opportunities. I'm just looking for the page number, which is 40, is it?
150 for the Rototuna Town Centre.
Yeah.
Can you just remind me?
What's your page number?
Page 40.
40.
I'm not prepared to approve that on the risks and opportunities. So, CFO, I'll go to the CE. What's the options here?
I'd like to remind Councillor Freeman, Mr Chair, what the purpose of the risk and opportunity schedule was. This was a record that we could put up in front of the council to explain that we can complete movements that were happening during this period. It was the pluses and minuses that we don't lose them, and it is always the intention of senior leadership team and staff to bring back a balanced budget by the end of the year. So two things you'll notice, we do have a recommendation to accept the risks and opportunities. That's new, and that was part of something I recommended, and it's to stimulate the debate on it. I was finding that the level of debate on risks and opportunities, which is one of the key reports, wasn't there. So by adopting it, you are acknowledging it. It's not acknowledging that those items are actually crystallised and they're going to land there and stay there.
All right,
It is that we are going to work forward to balance it up. And if we were to take it off, we've lost that transparency that I'm trying to achieve. So by putting it on here, we don't lose that intention to balance it off. We just are recording that we are focused on doing so.
All right, so look, I accept that from the CE. So my point is, which I raised at the last meeting, and I'm pleased to see there's a report in here in relation to an item to do with Chris's area, is my objective here is to encourage an option to be put forward as to how what's traded if there's an overrun on something, what falls off to meet that overrun. That's my objective here. So as long as that's noted, I'm happy to take the CE's advice on the purpose of this report. But I do want to see a stronger inspection of what drops off to meet the overrun, and the CFOs and the CE, I know, understand that. All right, so I'm happy.
And we are receiving these reports rather than approving them, so.
Okay.
Okay. So I have a mover and a seconder. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Item number 11, which is the Development Contributions Revenue Update, which is on page 114. Who's going to present that? You are? Okay, Paul will present that.
Mr Chair, I'll take this report as read, highlighting that it has been a positive first 3 months for development contributions, but as I noted earlier, there is some risk that some of those at least are timing differences where things have actually occurred earlier in the year than originally anticipated.
Councillor O'Leary.
Just a question on point 5 there. What is intra-developer tactics? Sounds very suspicious.
Sounds medical, doesn't it?
It does. Irregular market behaviour? I know what that is, but what's intra-developer tactics?
Developers in some cases are actually timing when they pay their development contributions, so they are carefully
Okay, I get it now.
timing that.
Yeah. To their benefit, they use the system well.
Sorry?
They manipulate, or to their benefit, they use the system. Manipulate's a hard word, but is that what?
I think
Timing.
they use the ability they have as much as possible to defer their payment. Yes,
So it's timing though, isn't it?
that's
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Paul, could you just give some examples of what that means? So a developer has an ability to pay levies or not pay levies depending on what he does with the property, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. I
do you
do.
wanna-
I understand it. I do. I don't need further clarification.
Oh,
but you don't?
can I please have some
Oh,
explanation, please?
okay.
Yes.
Just making sure.
Leah, do you want to come forward and present?
So it's just more, there's certain triggers in the process that DCs must be paid prior to. So if they're not looking to sell the section for 3 months, then they won't
Please,
go for 224C, and therefore they won't be required to pay DCs.
What language are you speaking then?
Oh, sorry.
English.
2244CC.
So in order to sell a section, they require a title.
Yep.
And that's our trigger for DC payment. So if they're not wanting to sell the section, they'll delay
They
the
won't
DC.
apply for the title.
Yeah,
Okay, and so they can have a piece of land that's piece of land,
ready to go.
and with a bit of paper, it triggers the thing. Without the bit of paper, it doesn't trigger. Okay, thank you.
but presumably they don't get paid for the section, do they, until they've issued the 224C, is it?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the carrot for them to get paid for the section is to have the title.
Yeah.
Yep.
So theoretically, you wouldn't, if in a perfect world, a developer wouldn't get a 224C, whatever it is,
Until they're ready.
until he's
to-
got a sale and purchase
You're
agreement
fluent.
in his hand. Yeah,
You're fluent already.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
easy one to pick up. Huh?
Councillor King.
Like English.
So when it's an extension on the building, is it triggered by the building permit sign-off?
So it's triggered by the code of compliance.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr Chair, I'd like to be very explicit. We're not criticising developers for doing this.
No.
What they're doing is taking full advantage of what they're able to do,
You said manipulate.
particularly
Yeah, that was
when,
a harsh word.
yeah, particularly when there is the issue that they may not have yet sold the section. You can fully understand them taking advantage of that.
It's no different to paying tax on the last day that
Yeah,
it's
of
due.
course. Or your rates.
Or your rates, yeah. Okay, so we have on the table that the report be received. I'd like to so move. Have a seconder for that, please. Councillor Mallet. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Item number 12, which is the procurement report. Scott, welcome.
Thank you, Mr Chairman.
I'll take the report as read, so if you'd like to speak to any matters there.
Probably the only two matters that aren't standard in the report is just the notification that the Procurement Policy and Procedures Manual has been updated around guidance for the LAS Professional Services Panel that has been put in place. That's an action of the previous Finance Committee minutes, and that in attachment 3 to the report, there's been some further definitions added around some of the jargon that is contained in the report around what is an RFX and what's meant by public or private tenders.
Thank you. Any questions of Scott? Okay, well, I'll so move that the report be received. Have a seconder. Councillor Mallet. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item number 13, which is the Stormwater and Wastewater Works report from Tal and Chris. Also take that report as read.
We're just happy to answer any questions to the report, unless you'd like me to talk to it.
Well, is there anything in the report, anything that you want to speak to that might clarify any technical aspects in the report that we might need some help with?
Yeah, no, look, I think just to clarify, it's not a request for extra funding, it's just our process about how we allocate work to different contracts. This is a contract that we let 2 or so years ago when we were only making assumptions about the program of works and what work we'll do under that contract. So this is a request to adjust the approved contract sum to match the final year of work under this contract. So just repeat, it's not a request for extra funding, it's just how we allocate the work in the unit for very standard operational renewal work.
So any questions from councillors? Right, well, I'll recommend that the report be received and the approved contract sum, the contract 11106, stormwater and wastewater works at 9.2 million, be increased by 1.6 million to 10.8 million, excluding GST. I have a seconder for that, please. Thank you, Councillor Mallet. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 14, which is the private developer agreement. I think you're still there, Chris?
Yes. So this is probably a type of agreement that we might see a little bit more of in the future. So this is a proposal to enter into a private developer agreement with a particular developer in Peacock Stage 1. So from the attachment in the graph on page 134, you can see the dark outline is the Peacock Stage 1 area, which is one of our priority growth cells. So we have funding in our current 10-year plan to work with developers to develop that area. The potential for that area is up to 850 lots. Some of the work required is work that we would normally do, is to put in some wastewater solutions. We have the money scheduled 2 years out in our plan, and the developer's ready to go now. So the particular developer is collaborating with a number of developers in that area. He's prepared to fund our wastewater work now and be paid back at the point in time when we have it in our program. So he would by default meet all of the sort of finance costs and everything, and we would only incur the debt at the point in time when it's currently in our plan. It's a very, it is a priority growth cell. All the other infrastructure's in place, and it's a cell that would grow pretty quickly once the wastewater solution is in place. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. This is the first one we've had, eh? We haven't had a...
We've had quite a few over the years, but in terms of our current thinking and the the growth funding policy. This is
Yeah.
maybe the first one that's come up that's viewed through the lens of the growth funding policy. And in particular, paragraph 18 articulates some of the key areas of the policy that need to be considered when we're bringing forward proposals like this.
Yeah, so the eight, and one of my questions was how many lots was it? So the 850, does that fit? Is there any risk with the regional policy statement in that was, I think it's 2016 or 17, when they expected some activity in this area? And
No, this is all very consistent. So just to be clear, this proposal won't unleash the full 850 lots. So it's something less than that. The catchment that this pump station will serve is, I've got the figure in there, it's 170 lots.
Yep.
But no, this is all just very consistent with the regional policy statement, future-proof, and our own land use planning.
And you also say that in point 20 that the asset will be vested to council ownership, and I understand the 800,000's within budget, but I don't, unless I've missed it, I can't see anything in here about operational costs from that date, because that, you know, was it 16, 17 is when it was going to come on stream, so we've got a couple of years of operational costs.
Yeah. So our proposal would be to look, and this is in the scheme of our infrastructure. This pump station is very small.
Yeah.
So it's our proposal that we keep it simple. The developer builds it and vests it to us in the normal manner. It's better for us to be managing and looking after integrated infrastructure. So we would look after it at our cost as the proposal. It's the capital cost that would be the subject of the PDA, of the private developer.
So the maintenance, all the operational costs, we don't have a budget for up until, we only have budget till after 2016.
I just sort of restate, I think this one pump station is very, very small in the context of our operational budgets to run. Now, if it was a major development and major operational costs for 2 years, we might have a different view, but this is almost negligible in terms of the cost.
So what would be a number then plucked out of the year?
Andrew, would you?
I mean, I don't know what negligible means.
The cost would be relatively small because, number one, the pump station will be new, so maintaining will be very low. So it's only consumables such as electricity, and because you have a very small number of lots feeding into it, because the first few titles would only come through a year or two or so down the track, the electricity use would be very low. So if I have to guess a number, but I'd be thinking $1,000, $2,000 in total, certainly for the first year or so.
So outside of the LTP budget, which our policy is very clear, that anything out of that policy that's not planned for in the LTP needs to be funded by the developer. Is that right?
It's probably.
You were saying about.
It's probably not that rigid, but I think the notion is that it's played by the developer. Yes. So in answer to your question, what would be a trigger point? I haven't put much thought onto that, but certainly if it was getting up to the $10,000 per annum, you'd certainly start looking towards the developer.
Okay, so a couple of thousand.
I was just going to follow that particular bit up, if I could, Angela. Surely our policy says that if we're allowing advance funding of infrastructure ahead of the due time in the plan, then the rest of it follows that has to be also funded by the, until such time as our budget kicks in. And it's operational or anything. It shouldn't be up to us at all whether it's 1,000 or 10,000.
Look, I haven't got the policy in front of me, but I don't think it's that clear on the issue. But in this particular one there, if it was council's will, we could go back. It might create us a lot more administration costs to invoice the developer for his share of the operational cost than what it's worth. But
Isn't it reasonable to assume that once the pump station starts getting used, there will be some sections that will be using it, which will be creating revenue for the city in terms of rates that we weren't getting beforehand? So I see there's I don't know, I assume if that's right, there must be a nexus between maintenance and additional rates coming on stream.
yeah, I see the matter raised by council as a matter of consistency of approach, probably more than the substance of this one or the quantum of this one. So the dollars are really low, but in this case, we could incorporate that with the will of council into the PDA to maintain the operational costs.
If I can just finish, I guess my concern, I'm expressing concern that my interpretation of the policy, I thought it was quite a definitive line, and because the costs aren't included in here, and it's, you know, well, okay, we'll absorb the cost because it's minimal, that sets precedence for the next agreement that we get where the cost isn't minimal. Because we have a policy that I interpreted as to being quite defined on these agreements, I don't think I'm not concerned about the minimal amount, I'm concerned about precedence.
So, look, I've been thinking while I've been talking,
great.
but I think the policy...
Good, Chris.
Do you not normally do that? Sometimes I don't.
It's a great project, but...
But I think the policy can be... There is another section and there's recognition of benefits. So I think it's sort of talking to the chair's point there in terms of the bringing in DCs and some of the other benefits that might accrue. You can have some flexibility around in the PDA and reflecting the benefits against some or all of the costs. Now, the most obvious one to go to, I guess, is DC remissions, and the policy allows that conversation to happen. So clearly, in this case, we're not allowing any DC remissions, but you could fit into the operational cost being more by us in balance of the benefits of having these sections brought to the market. The DCs come a lot quicker to us in payment of DCs when they get title, and sections and rates. So you could interpret it that way. The policy, I think I'm looking at Blair, the policy can be interpreted to do that.
And clearly the most important cost that we avoid is the financing cost of the 800,000. Because if we put that station in today, from day one we're paying about 48,000 a year in interest charges before anything really happens, given that's the capital cost.
That's correct, and the more normal developer approach might be to try and get a DC remission to counter the costs of the finance, but we're clearly we're not going there on this. There's no DC remissions, so the full financing cost will be met by the developer.
So, Councillor, I've got some other questions. So, Councillor Forsyth was next.
I think it's pretty much been covered. Even the fact that we're getting some more houses coming along earlier than originally planned, I think it's good for the city, isn't it?
Thank you. Councillor Mallett?
No, it's got to be covered for that discussion.
Okay. Councillor King?
Yeah, I've been covered too.
Okay. Your Worship, the Mayor?
Look, I was just going to say, I've just read the policy now, and it certainly contemplates cost and benefit in this, and clearly there's an upside to us. Yeah. So I think, Chris, you're absolutely right. The policy contemplates taking into account the benefits that we receive from them going forward. Yeah. So, I mean, they were good questions, I thought, that Councillor Leary raised, but the policy is very good. It's very good. Yep. Shocked.
All right, so we're ready to vote on this. So item 8, recommendations from management. Items A, B and C. Have somebody move that? Sorry, who was that?
Me.
Councillor Me.
Seconded from Councillor Young. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks. Thanks for that, Chris. Thanks, Andrew. Next item is item 15, which is the reporting back on the Garden Place car park access control system.
Yes, so
You're still there?
yes, Councillor. So the council has made the decision on this. They just asked us to come back to look at reprioritising the program and how we would meet the funding. So this report has just identified some projects, and they are included on the risk and opportunity schedule, so you can see the counter balance that we talked about this morning. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Questions from councillors? Councillor Mallett?
Could you just expand a bit on the integration of different transport modes?
So that's just the title that's been given to that particular project, and we're colloquially calling it the discretionary one of the discretionary transport budgets.
Yeah.
So there's a number of projects on there that the working group have been working through and not funding. So there is.
So just to be clear, the discretionary transport budget is bus shelters, those sort of things, isn't it?
Yeah, this particular one, the integration of different transport modes, was all to do with capital works for walking, cycling, public transport, and this year council has chosen to do some amenity type projects out of that.
So what you're saying is that that budget will, from that budget will be drawn some of the money to cover the cost of the this project, the car park project.
Correct.
Thank you.
I'll move it.
Excuse me.
I'll move.
Thank you, Your Worship. Have a seconder, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Those in favour, please say aye. Against?
Me. Another me. Yep.
Councillor Forsyth. A recommendation is carried. Item number 16, which is the water treatment plant, additional health and safety measures.
Yep, so once again, Mr Chair, so council has already considered the substantial report on the chlorine scrubber and approved a project with an estimated budget of $1.7 million. So this report is not about any extra funding, it's just the contract within that $1.7 million already approved. So the reason it's before council is we're asking for approval for a direct appointment of the equipment. So the notion will be that we will go out and buy the equipment, and the reason a direct appointment is very specialist equipment and only one company that we've found that it would be appropriate for us to buy the equipment from. We will then secure the equipment and will provide it free issue to a civil works contractor who will then build it into the whole project. So the approval I'm asking for is up to a value of $500,000 to buy the equipment. It'll all be within the 1.7 budget already approved by council.
What are the advantages of us buying it directly rather than having the contractor presumably acquire it and include it in their contract?
Yeah, so just talking to Andrew, a couple of advantages. One is particularly time. So there's quite a long lead time for this equipment. We have a process to go through to tender and get on board a civil works contractor. So while we're going through that procurement process, we can get underway with the order of this equipment and have it delivered in time for the project timetable. Mm-hmm. So a 20-week lead time for this particular equipment.
And are there some cost advantages or dealing directly with the manufacturer? Does that give us some degree of strength if we need repair work done and so forth going forward?
Yep. So yeah, we've certainly articulated that in the report. Yep. Somewhere about the relationship with the supply contractor. So we've purchased it and we have a stronger relationship then in terms of ongoing management and operation of the equipment.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Forsyth?
Chris, can you just explain, is the PIF 12029 actually the installation of a dewatering facility at the water treatment plant? Is that what that means?
So what council did in the last report, they've allowed us to reprioritise that project so that the chlorine scrubber was an issue that came in unexpectedly for us. It is a high priority, so the last report we brought to council articulated the view that this is a higher priority than the the Alum Sludge project, and council agreed to reallocate the funding from that project towards this project.
So what does that mean for the other project? We just don't do it, or we put it on hold?
So the other project was, Andrew might want to jump in here to add to it, but the other project was put into our program at a time when we used to take our solid waste up to Hampton Downs. So in the intervening period, we've found a sustainable use for our biosolids, and we take them down to Tokoroa and vermiculture and into the forest. So the alum sludge one was about removing hard elements from the biosolids so they could go to landfill, because we saw the time would be limited where you could actually take that quality of material and put it into landfill. So the vermiculture one is proving to be quite successful, and we see a bit of longevity in that arrangement. So the priority has come off that project a little bit. It might come back onto the table in the future if the vermiculture option doesn't work out through economics or everything, but at the moment it appears to be working out very well for us.
Okay, thanks.
I'm happy to move.
Thank you, Your Worship. Have a seconder. Sorry, another question, Councillor King.
Is chlorine a gas or a liquid?
Gas for us.
So how do you collect it, and what does this do?
It sucks the atmosphere in the room out through a cartridge, a little bit like a catalytic converter is on a car exhaust system. So it sucks it through a cartridge, which effectively strips the chlorine gas out.
And collects it again?
It chemically collects it,
Yep.
and then the resulting air discharges goes out the atmosphere clean with no chlorine left in it.
And it's a health and safety reason why we're doing it?
Oh, absolutely, yes, we're talking significant quantities of chlorine.
And the technology hasn't been here until now?
There's technology been around for scrubbers for some time.
So why haven't we had it in?
Yeah, so we're probably going back to the last report, but the background was increasing focus by the new legislation on hazardous sites, and looking at our chlorine handling operations there and our emergency procedures. So it's come from an audit from WorkSafe New Zealand of our site, and they are going up and down the country looking at a lot of hazardous sites, including chlorine scrubbers. So the report sort of generated from that angle.
Thank you.
So I have Her Worship moving the recommendation from management. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Forsyth. Those in favour, please say aye. This is item 4, A, B. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 17 has been removed from the agenda. Item 18.
So 17, that's
was removed
it's community occupancy.
Was removed from the agenda at the confirmation when the agenda was
Oh,
confirmed
yeah,
at the
sure,
beginning
sure,
of the
okay.
meeting.
And that's just going to the...
It's being referred back for a council briefing, and then to be referred on to the S&P committee.
Okay, thanks.
Agenda item 18 is the municipal endowment lease freeholding of 205 Price Street. Welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You take the report as read.
Certainly.
Are there
Happy
any
to answer any
questions? No questions. Therefore, move the recommendations from management under item 7. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor O'Leary, seconder, Deputy Mayor Chesterman. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 18 dealt with. Item 19, Parks and Open Spaces, and the construction of the World War I Memorial Garden at Marana Park, Memorial Park.
I'll take the item as read, Mr. Chairman. This is really a procedural matter. It's above staff's delegation for a direct contract appointment. I think the report's reasonably self-explanatory. Just need approval so that we can get the garden finished before the 100-year commemoration of Gallipoli, actually, in 2015, Anzac Day.
I'll move when you're ready, Mr Chair.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So that's the end of the open agenda. It probably is a good time now to break for afternoon tea.
How long for?
It's 5 to 3, so let's all be back here at 10 past, please.
Okay, cool.
So Chair, I'll just be a little bit late back. I've got a meeting.
So 10 past 3 for the public excluded section.